When people think of American tanks in the Second World War, they picture fast-moving columns of M4 Shermans pushing across France, Italy, or the Pacific. They picture quantity, mobility, and mechanical reliability. Heavy tanks, slow, armored breakthrough vehicles, do not usually enter the conversation. Yet behind the scenes, American engineers and the Army Ordnance Department worked persistently on heavy tank concepts throughout the war. In today's video, we will explore those engineering efforts, the M6 heavy tank, the Pershing prototypes, and the massive T-29, T-32 experimental machines. These heavy tanks rarely reached battlefields, but their development shaped the evolution of American armored doctrine and the emergence of the main battle tank concept. A heavy tank in mid-20th century doctrine was designed for breakthrough operations. These tanks featured thick frontal armor, large caliber weapons, and a chassis capable of absorbing high-stress combat loads. Heavy tanks were not meant to exploit breakthroughs. That was the role of lighter, faster vehicles, but to create them. The German army fielded the Panzerkampfwagen 6 Tiger with its iconic 88mm gun and 100mm frontal armor. The Red Army deployed the KV-1 and later the IS-2, both capable of shrugging off most early war anti-tank fire. Britain fielded infantry support heavy vehicles such as the Churchill. In contrast, the United States held a different doctrine. While nations like Germany and the USSR assumed tank against tank combat would be central to operations, the US Army emphasized combined arms. Tanks were primarily meant to support infantry or exploit breakthroughs created by artillery and air power, not to deal with enemy armor. This doctrinal difference is noted in multiple Army ground forces memoranda between 1941 and 1943. These definitions evolved throughout the war, but the core idea remained consistent. Heavier tanks traded speed for survivability and penetration power. The question was whether such vehicles aligned with American logistics and strategy. For much of the war, the Army believed they did not. The story begins in May 1940 when the U.S. Ordnance Department initiated the T-1 heavy tank program. Europe had just witnessed the German Blitzkrieg. American planners feared they would need a tank capable of countering German breakthroughs or fortified positions. The result was the heavy tank M6, standardized in February 1942. Mechanically, the M6 was ambitious. Engineers experimented with two drive systems, a torque converter transmission and a full electric transmission. The electric variant used twin Westinghouse electric motors powered by a generator linked to the radial engine, similar to the system later used in the German Ferdinand/Elephant tank destroyer. The dual gun turret arrangement reflected pre-war uncertainty regarding optimal tank armament. Some officers argued that a quick-firing 37mm gun was essential for soft targets and range finding, while the 76mm provided high explosive punch. In practice, this arrangement complicated crew coordination and added weight. Despite its ambitious design, by the time the M6 was ready, tank doctrine had moved on. The Army ground forces concluded the tank was too heavy, too complex, and unnecessary for anticipated overseas operations. Its armor was only marginally thicker than a Sherman's, and its firepower, though imposing on paper, was soon outclassed by new German designs. By 1942, production was cancelled after only 40 vehicles. Not a single M6 reached frontline service. Why did the United States, with enormous industrial capacity, decline to field heavy tanks until the final months of the war? The answer lies in three interlocking factors: doctrine, logistics, and battlefield assessment. American armored doctrine emphasized mobility and combined arms. Tanks were not expected to engage enemy tanks head-on. That was the job of tank destroyer battalions equipped with fast, high-velocity guns. This view is supported in Field Manual FM 17-10, Armored Force Operations 1942. A 57-ton tank was difficult to ship, unload, maintain, and recover. U.S. landing craft and pontoon bridges had load limits that favored medium tanks. A Sherman could be towed by an M31 or another Sherman. An M6 would require specialized equipment not yet in theater. From 1942 to mid-1943, the Sherman outperformed or matched most Axis vehicles it encountered. Only with the appearance of the Tiger I in late 1942 and the Panther in mid-1943 did the need for heavier American guns become urgent. Even then, the Army believed upgunned Shermans were more efficient in terms of resolutions. The result of these assessments was a long delay in heavy tank deployment, one that would only be reversed by new battlefield realities in late 1944. By 1943, reports from North Africa and the Eastern Front made it clear that German armor was evolving. Heavy frontal armor and long-barreled guns forced the U.S. to consider improvements. One of these improvements was a T-23 medium tank, an experimental design completed in 1943. It used an advanced electric transmission, allowing smooth and precise steering without a mechanical gearbox, an innovation decades ahead of its time. Although the T-23 never saw combat, its turret became legendary. The T-23 turret was adopted almost wholesale for the M4A176W and the M4A376W Shermans, greatly enhancing U.S. anti-armor capability late in the war. This turret was also the testbed for the early 19mm gun installations that would later inform the Pershing series. In many ways, the T-23 represented the bridge between the medium tank philosophy of early war and the heavier firepower needed in 1944. By 1944, the U.S. Army could no longer ignore German advances. The Panther's sloped armor and high-velocity 75mm gun were proving devastating to Allied tanks in Normandy and beyond. American engineers had been working on a heavier tank since 1942, and after several redesigns, the T-26E1, T-26E2, and T-26E3 prototypes emerged with a new decisive feature, the 90mm M3 gun. The T-26E3, later standardized as the M26 Pershing, finally offered the U.S. a tank with both high-penetration firepower and modern sloped armor. Pershings arrived in Europe in January 1945 under the Zebra mission, a field evaluation program of 20 vehicles. The Cologne duel, captured on film by U.S. cameraman Jim Bates, famously showed a T-26E3 destroying a Panther from the flank. The engagement demonstrated that the Pershing had the power and accuracy needed to challenge Germany's best armor. Technically, the Pershing introduced several advancements: improved gun stabilization, superior optics compared to earlier U.S. tanks, more efficient ammunition handling, and a more compact torsion bar suspension. But the tank arrived too late. Only a few dozen saw combat before Germany surrendered. Even before the Pershing entered service, the Ordnance Department anticipated future German vehicles, Maus, E-Series, and other rumored super heavies. In anticipation, engineers began developing an entire family of heavy tanks intended to defeat the most heavily armored vehicles imaginable. The T-29 heavy tank, 70 tons, 105mm T5E1 gun, and up to 279mm turret armor, with an advanced rangefinder and hydraulic turret system. The T-30 heavy tank, armed with a massive 155mm T7 gun and designed to counter deeply entrenched fortifications. The T-32 heavy tank, improved armor over the front hull and designed as a more combat-realistic alternative to the T-29. These vehicles were technologically impressive, but the war ended before they could be produced in numbers. Only a handful were completed and tested. Their greatest legacy was conceptual. They demonstrated the limitations of the heavy tank category and pointed toward a future where firepower, mobility, and armor would be combined into a single vehicle type. While American tanks had minimal influence on World War II itself, they had a profound impact on post-war developments. The Pershing series evolved into the M46, then the M47, and finally the highly successful M48 and M60 Patton tanks. These designs incorporated lessons learned from the T-29 and T-30 programs, especially in turret design and ballistic protection. The last true American heavy tank was the M103, fielded in the 1950s, carrying a 120mm gun and weighing nearly 60 tons. The M103 embodied the peak of heavy tank philosophy. However, as NATO doctrine evolved and technology improved, the distinctions between light, medium, and heavy tanks blurred. By the late 1950s, the United States, like most nations, embraced the main battle tank concept, which combined firepower, armor, and mobility into a single platform. In this sense, the M6, Pershing, T-29, and T-32 were stepping stones, experiments that paved the way for the unified MBT philosophy. America's World War II heavy tanks were innovative, powerful, and ambitious, yet they arrived too late, or not at all. For the war, they were designed to fight. Still, their development reveals how doctrine, engineering, and industrial capacity shaped armored warfare. What rolls onto the battlefield is not just a product of technology, but of strategy, logistics, and national priorities. If you enjoyed this in-depth exploration of American armored engineering, consider subscribing for more long-form military history, and let us know in the comments, should the United States have deployed heavy tanks earlier in the war, or was the focus on mobility the right call?